The humans took to the stars, as the rest of the galaxy looked on in terror. The alien races had just not expected their rate of expansion, of advancement. When they at last visited Earth, the kings and queens and medieval knights that roamed the lands had seemed positively infantile, yet their thirst for blood, their love for war, proved an ominous development. The next time they had looked, the humans were already in the stars, probing into other planets, creating vessels that would send them there. They had improved exponentially. No other race had seen anything like it. And it dawned on them, through calculation and intrigue, that by the time a conquering force would reach Earth and its surrounds, the humans' technology would already surpass their own. Their rate of expansion, of improvement, far outshone what they could do on their own. So they were left to choose: go out and be defeated, wait and be conquered, or flee into the unknown, leaving behind all that they held dear to avoid their inevitable demise. And that was the option they took, retreating into the unknown, fleeing that which they had so foolishly mocked before. Many years later, when humans, united as one and pacified, fully traversed the stars, they found countless civilizations abandoned, entire planets empty. And they wondered what terrible catastrophe had occurred, and what giants had roamed these lands. The humans searched through countless solar systems, the absence of sentience ever present. The sprawling cities, spanning entire planets, seemed perfectly habitable, if not rudimentary in design. Like ghost ships of old, they were all empty, with no signs of struggle, of destruction. The human fleet stretched across the deepest recesses of the galaxy, searching for some kind of answer, some reason behind the catastrophe. Not just for curiosity's sake, but safety, as whatever had befallen the countless prior races could threaten the humans all the same. And yet their quest proved fruitless, as did all their attempts of discovery. The galaxy was all but empty, and while it was sure that they were not alone before, it was now certain that only they remained. The humans thus settled the galaxy, constantly unsettled by the unsaleable mystery. In time, however, it became more myth than fact, and soon the legend faded into obscurity entirely. Generations ebbed and flowed as the relics of old were buried and replaced by human design. Progress slowed, as existential threat no longer loomed, and conflict had long since subsided. Strife nor struggle remained, and the humans became comfortable, meek, and weak. And that is when the alien races, unified as one, came to take back that which was rightfully theirs. The black hole in the center of the galaxy, ever present, ever looming, had been their source. What had seemed a simple black hole, or perhaps disguised as so, had truly been a wormhole. Fleets flocked from it like a wave of steel, spreading out in an arc of destruction. They gave the humans no warning, no mercy. The aliens fired on the planets that had once been their homes, now monuments to their forced retreat, and sought to destroy all that the humans had created. The humans posed no threat, no remarkable resistance of any kind. Generations of armistice and pacification had left them declawed, having lost that which had made them so remarkable before. Weapons no longer existed in any form, having long since been decommissioned and repurposed in the wake of galactic peace. Countless planets, entire solar systems, fell without significant retaliation. Once again the ancient mystery resurfaced, of the galactic catastrophe that had wiped out all sentient species and civilizations before, but this time no city would remain intact. Inferno reigned, as billions cried out in the anguish and flames. Their fleets tore through the paltry resistance of the humans. The humans were now no more than children, having lived without care or worry for generations upon generations. The alien races, in contrast, had been made to survive in depravity, subsisting on the empty recesses of deep space. The aliens had advanced in technological prowess in their exile, spending centuries in a state of constant wartime production on the barren planets they were forced to inhabit. They had united against the existential threat of the humans, the rage and shame at having to flee their homes, holding their fervent plan of revenge. Vengeance had become their religion, as reverence and fanatical faith ebbed into the production of their armaments. They now possessed weapons that dwarfed what the humans had had in their prime, and intended to use them to their full extent. Like an ever-increasing sphere of death, the alien fleets moved out in the circle from the wormhole, tearing through the cities near the center of the galaxy, colonizing the remains and siphoning the planet's raw materials for further production of weaponry. In no time at all, most of the galaxy was firmly in the grasp of the united alien races. The humans on those planets that were not immediately killed were instead forced into slave labor to help produce the weapons to be used against their brethren. They were worked to death, as the aliens' ultimate goal was extermination, not submission. Only the perilous planets on the far outskirts of the galaxy remained in human control, the planets deemed uninhabitable by the majority of the human race. Those planets' human inhabitants were quite unlike their docile counterparts, having been forced to live in tundra, through natural disaster, through conflict against the native beasts, for the few resources the planets contained. Just as good times create weak men, as does hard times create strong men, and these men, shunned by the human populace at large for their rugged and violent manner, were strong men indeed. Despite the rest of the human race falling into willful ignorance, they had never forgotten the legend of galactic catastrophe. No, they instead prepared for it, revered it. And these men had a goal to save the human race, what little of it remained, and to destroy the cowardly invaders that had attacked them so unprovoked. Already the war effort was nearing its completion, as the united alien races had won victory after victory over the invaders that had forced them into their exile. All that remained were the ice planets, the planets on the very edges of the galaxy that the aliens considered the least threat of all, as their technological prowess was pitiful at best. Still, they would waste no time subduing them, as their thirst for vengeance would not be quenched until the final human had been exterminated. Fortunately, the planets the final humans resided on had little strategic or natural value, so the aliens did not have to hold back their weapons so as to preserve them. Instead, they could destroy them entirely, and with that their revenge would be complete. The aliens sent their dreadnoughts to the ice planets, mechanical beasts of unfathomable proportions. Each was designed to destroy a planet whole, a surgical beam that makes material implode in on itself, erasing it from existence. Each came equipped with a ballistic shield that rendered it practically impenetrable, save for advanced weaponry that only the aliens possessed. The humans had little time to prepare, the few refugees that had fled to their planets providing what little intel they knew. There seemed no escape, no hope for tactical retreat. Only the dark unknown remained beyond their planets, at the very edge of their galaxy, and with that, surely death. The humans all flocked towards a single planet, each in the small, rudimentary spacecraft of their home planets, designed to navigate and drill through the ice plains native to their planets. They all gathered there, perhaps as a concentration of force, or final last stand. The dreadnought arrived at the planet, as did the other dreadnoughts at their respective planets. It loomed over it, impossibly large, an omen of death, and began to charge its weapon. All at once, thousands of ships emerged from the planet. They coalesced on the dreadnought in a haphazard fashion, and it fired on them, their small size and nimble speed proving effective in dodging the attacks. And yet, not a single ship fired on the dreadnought, perhaps realizing the futility in their actions. None could hope to penetrate the shield. A few then flew directly at the dreadnought, full speed, in something akin to a kamikaze attack, and were immediately destroyed by the ballistic shield. It was an intelligent enough system to treat any object above a certain speed a threat, and would immediately activate and destroy it. But then, unflinchingly and all at once, the ships converged on the dreadnought, forming a sphere around it. Using the wreckage of their fallen ships as a guide, just as they came to the outer limit of the shield, they slowed to a crawl. They moved through the invisible barrier without detection or destruction. All the while, the ship's weapons fired on them, massacring them in devastating numbers. But there were simply too much. Too many. Crossing the shield's barrier, they descended on the dreadnought like ants onto a corpse, burrowing into its hull with startling efficiency. The ships were designed to drill into the hardest materials their galaxy had to offer, and made short work of the dreadnought's outer core. The ship breached. The humans erupted from their ships, slaughtering the dreadnought's inhabitants without hesitation. While the alien technology was unmatched, their fighting prowess was poor at best, and perhaps through hubris or simple ineptitude, none was sufficiently equipped for a breach. The humans made short work of them, and soon found the ship's DNA security protocols easy to bypass with the detached limbs of their enemies. The few aliens that managed to flee in escape pods were gunned down mercilessly, as a single escaped soul would undoubtedly compromise their mission. The humans had won their first victory since the arrival of the invaders, but no victory is without its cost. Despite the fact that they had commandeered the dreadnought, they still had to carry out the ship's mission. If their plan had any chance of succeeding at all, they would need to destroy their own planet, so as to not arouse suspicion. They had loaded their own spacecraft with the best and strongest humanity still had to offer, which invariably meant that the weak, the old, and even the children still remained on their home planet. Victory will not come without sacrifice, and there was no sacrifice more severe than this. The humans charged the dreadnought as they sealed the hundreds of breaches in the hull, melting down their lodged spacecraft to form molten patchwork. The ship not only needed to be flight-worthy, but seemingly intact. They watched as their home planet imploded in on itself, and in that moment, and that moment only, they allowed the anguish and pain to wash over themselves. They were now the last of their race, and that knowledge only served to harden their will. The humans messaged the commander, reporting the planetary extermination a success, and then fired up the interstellar thrusters. They then set forth onto the alien capital, and onto the next phase of their improbable, irrevocable mission. With all the reports of the dreadnoughts declared a resounding success, the alien races rejoiced. After centuries of exile, of constant wartime production, their goal had been completed, and with an efficiency and ease none could have guessed. The existential threat of the humans had forced them to unite and produce in fanatical fervor, but in the end the humans themselves had been their own downfall. Now the last trace of their species had been exterminated, and soon even their architecture and history would be erased from existence. The aliens had built weapons of terrible destruction, capable of destroying entire solar systems with a single missile, and had been fully prepared to use them. They expected the humans to possess weaponry of unparalleled proportion, but they had no such thing. The aliens took back their planets without significant damage to any of them, and already the alien races were colonizing their original home planets, each race returning to where their species had originally came from, to restore their civilization to greatness. This left a problem that the aliens had not foreseen. With the last human exterminated, the existential threat vanquished, there came a sudden power vacuum. That which had united the races was now gone, and yet their deadly armaments remained. Truthfully, the aliens had not expected to win so easily, to find themselves without a foe so quickly. Weapons and armaments capable of immense destruction remained in the possession of every race, and the semblance of conflict was already bubbling to the fore. After all, they now possessed enough firepower to destroy the entire galaxy thrice over, and diplomacy was surely needed, as they could not let their unification fall apart so quickly after their victory. With the imminent arrival of the dreadnoughts at the alien capital, diplomats were already calling for their decommission, for de-escalation of warfare. There was intense debate as to what should be done with the dreadnoughts and armaments at large, with a growing call to repurpose all weaponry, as they were now sure, and truly certain, as the humans had not been, that no external threat remained. The alien races were wise enough to know that warfare was forever a possibility if the ability to wage it remained, and they now had an opportunity to ensure that galactic peace never crumbled. They had worked for centuries to make this a reality, and they were truly on the cusp of achieving it. And yet, a catastrophe was brewing. All across the galaxy, radars were picking up readings of what seemed to be missiles heading directly towards their solar systems, each small and subtle enough so as to hide from detection, each seemingly timed to arrive at the same time. There seemed to be only one likely option. One of the alien races was attempting to wipe out every other race in the aftermath of the war, to declare themselves victors and remove any threat before it arose. Each planet scrambled to find out the source, the reason, but soon communications went from frantic to cut off completely, as the military quickly realized that no other race could be trusted. The pacifists and cautious among them urged the leaders to not react, citing radar malfunction or deception, but the commanders knew they could not wait. Hesitation would only result in their deaths without retaliation, and they had spent centuries with only one goal: revenge. They would not die without fulfilling it, or their centuries of exile would be for naught. There was only one protocol in this situation, unthinkable in proportion, and yet obvious in design: mutually assured destruction. The commanders ordered the retaliation, launching missiles capable of obliterating entire solar systems to each capital planet. They then hurried home to their families, to comfort them in their final hours. The galaxy was doomed, and while the general populace went mad, the leaders of each nation scrambled in their interstellar ships towards the only respite from the devastation that was about to occur: the wormhole in the center of the galaxy. Though one ship had already passed through it, and was waiting for them on the other end. Cataclysm approached fruition, as the missiles neared their destinations. Centuries spent in unification, all in exhaustive pursuit of a single goal, all for it to come crumbling down right after its completion. The races were frantic and fearful, but at least comforted by the fact that their deaths would not be in vain. They would not die without revenge. In a sense, the goal they had set out to do would be achieved, and twice over. The missiles each arrived at their destination simultaneously, the alien races tightly hugging their wives, their husbands, their children, and then nothing. No detonation, no explosion. The missiles, the solar system destroyers, were nothing but decoys, fakes. Escape pods re-engineered to mimic a missile, a tactic so rudimentary in design, so implausible in practice, but one that seized upon the political strife and turmoil such that it quickly cascaded into disaster. It was already too late. The retaliatory bombs had already been launched, mutual destruction already assured. In the end, they too had been the architects of their own defeat, and the anguished apologies sent to their once allies would not reverse the end of everything. The end of the galaxy was nigh, and none could stop it now. Only the galaxy's leaders, the rich and the powerful, had any hope of surviving, as they all flocked towards the wormhole, the only respite from the coming carnage. As the eruptions began, as whole solar systems were eradicated by the very weapons they themselves had created, the last vestiges of each race entered the wormhole, just as they had done centuries before. The first few spacecraft to pass through were greeted by a ship of their own, a dreadnought, stripped bare and made of molten patchwork, directly facing the wormhole. Its weapon fully charged. It opened fire. The ships in the wormhole were immediately caught in the blast, the beam of destruction growing ever larger with the arrival of each new spacecraft, like fuel to a flame. Entire vestiges of species were eradicated, as space-time and material denatured around them. The approaching ships could do nothing to stop their demise, as only death and destruction remained in their wake. The entire wormhole began to collapse in on itself, as the dreadnought's beam turned it into an inferno of plasma and decay. As the aliens screamed out in agony and terror, perhaps in their final moments they still suspected betrayal, or finally realized that the humans had in fact orchestrated the complete destruction of their species. It made no difference, however, as their demise was assured all the same. The humans looked on, not in joy, but in sorrow. They had destroyed not only their invaders, but their families, their entire galaxy. They had sacrificed everything in the pursuit of victory, and what little of them that remained had no home to return to, no children to console. The irradiated remains of the galaxy was the only vestige left of the trillions of lives that had resided there, and the wormhole would no longer allow passage through regardless. The humans settled on the outer planets just as their foe had done before, finding the harsh terrain, stripped of all resources, even less hospitable than their native planets. Still, they were a hardy people and lived on through sheer force of will. There they lived out their days in hardship yet relative peace, spreading the legend of the catastrophe and their victory over it through every generation, leaving their children left to wonder what would have happened if, at any point, the humans and the aliens had simply tried to speak to each other.